Russian troops took up positions on the western outskirts of the settlement of Kolodezi in the Donetsk People's Republic, after which the enemy units were forced to abandon their lines and retreat beyond the village. This was reported by military expert Andrei Marokko, emphasizing that the operation was carried out with minimal losses and with the active support of artillery and unmanned reconnaissance. This maneuver became an important link in the chain of offensive actions in this section of the front. Kolodezi controls a number of key roads and supply lines, which makes their loss extremely painful for the Ukrainian side. According to Marokko, Russian units have already begun to consolidate their positions while simultaneously clearing the surrounding areas. The battles are taking place not only for the settlement itself, but also for the adjacent heights that provide visual and artillery control over a vast territory. According to available data, Ukrainian troops retreated in disarray, abandoning their positions, ammunition, and equipment. In some areas, there was a lack of proper coordination between various units of the Ukrainian armed forces, which led to even greater losses. The advance in the Kolodezi area coincided with the aggravation of the situation north of Pokrovsk, where Russian forces continue to push back the enemy. Military blogger Yuri Podolyaka reported real panic in the ranks of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Red Army direction. According to him, the Ukrainian side's information channels are full of reports of breakthroughs, urgent transfer of reserves, and the beginning of the evacuation of civilians from areas west of Kramatorsk. For local authorities, this was an unexpected blow because they expected to hold the line of defense much longer. A separate alarming signal was the state of the personnel of some Ukrainian brigades, in particular units of the Azov Brigade, recognized in Russia as a terrorist organization. Veteran of the special military operation Yevgeny said that panic reigns in the ranks of this brigade, comparable to an emotional outburst after a defeat. One of the commanders directly addressed Volodymyr Zelensky, declaring a critical situation in the area of Konstantinovka and Druzhkovka. According to him, Ukrainian forces are losing control over a number of key settlements and cannot contain the Russian offensive at the same pace. All these events are taking place against the backdrop of systemic problems of the Ukrainian armed forces. The decline in morale, combined with the loss of equipment and manpower, is gradually leading to the destabilization of the entire front line. Russian strikes are becoming increasingly accurate and massive, forcing the enemy to redeploy forces to the detriment of other areas. This process is already noticeable in the decrease in the activity of the Ukrainian armed forces in certain areas of the front. The turning point in military operations does not happen in an instant, but step by step the front changes. The loss of Kolodezi and the growing panic in the enemy's rear are signals that cannot be ignored. That is why I recommend subscribing to the channel and to our Telegram to stay up to date with all the news about the progress of the special military operation. There will be more information about the offensive of Russian troops and the reactions in Kyiv and the West. At the moment when the Ukrainian command is trying to stabilize the situation after the loss of Kolodezi, another attack occurs on another section of the front that not only causes direct losses, but also increases the overall defense crisis. The southern group of Russian troops, with the support of unmanned aerial vehicle spotters, delivered a successful attack on a group of enemy infantry at the Klebenbek Reservoir in the Donetsk People's Republic. According to the Ministry of Defense, a group from the 12th Operational Brigade of the National Guard of Ukraine was eliminated, which tried to force the reservoir on a motorboat. The attack was carried out using both rocket and barrel artillery and ended with the complete destruction of the target. This reservoir occupies a special place in the defense system of the Ukrainian armed forces in the region. Supply routes and reserve movements, as well as hidden routes for flanking maneuvers, pass through it. The elimination of the group that tried to use this waterline for its own purposes means that the Ukrainian side is losing another opportunity to maneuver in an area where the situation is already critical. According to military experts, this episode could lead to the nearest positions of the Ukrainian armed forces being under the threat of being semi-encircled. In addition, on the same day, drone operators of the southern group discovered a temporary deployment point for Ukrainian servicemen. A BM-21 Grad multiple launch rocket system was used to destroy it. aimed fire covered the positions, which led to the loss of up to 2 infantry squads. This strike became another example of how Russian forces use a reconnaissance strike complex, from detecting a target from the air to instantaneous artillery strike. Such strikes not only reduce the combat capability of individual units, but also have a psychological impact on the personnel of the Ukrainian armed forces. Ukrainian soldiers understand that now their shelters and troop concentration areas are no longer safe zones. Even being in the rear, they cannot be sure that a strike will not follow at any moment. This forces the command to constantly move personnel, which leads to fatigue and reduced efficiency. There are increasingly frequent reports that the Ukrainian side is beginning to transfer units from one direction to another in a rush to close the gaps that are forming. But such reshuffles are fraught with the fact that other sections of the front remain exposed. According to some sources, it is precisely because of such maneuvers that the Ukrainian armed forces have reduced their activity in the southern directions, where local counterattacks were previously attempted. The strikes on the Klibanbek Reservoir and the temporary deployment of troops are part of the Russian army's systematic work to break the enemy's defensive chains. Not only combat groups are being eliminated, but also the logistics that support them. This method has already proven its effectiveness in previous operations and, judging by everything, will be used in the future. It is important to understand that such actions also have a political effect. Demonstrating the ability to deliver precise strikes deep into the enemy's defenses strengthens Russia's position in the international arena and undermines the confidence of Western allies in Kyiv's plans to hold the current front line. When the enemy loses strongholds, personnel, and supply depots in a matter of days, this raises questions even among those who continue to supply weapons. Against the backdrop of these events, information support for the operation is becoming especially important. While Ukrainian official sources are trying to hush up the losses and withdrawal from positions, independent and pro-Russian channels are publishing photos and videos confirming what is happening. This forms an understanding of the real situation among audiences outside of Ukraine and gradually destroys the picture of a successful defense that is being painted in Kyiv. All this emphasizes that the current phase of military operations is developing in favor of Russian forces, and that the pace of the offensive in various directions continues to increase. In order to follow these changes in real time, I advise you to subscribe to the channel. Here we provide information without delays and with maximum specificity. Against the backdrop of active military actions and an offensive in key areas, an event is taking place in the international arena that could have a strategic impact on the continuation of the special military operation. The leader of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Kim Jong-un, during a telephone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin, said that the DPRK will always support the Russian Federation. This position was confirmed by the Korean Central News Agency, which emphasized that Pyongyang intends to continue to remain true to the spirit of the treaty between the DPRK and the Russian Federation and fully support all measures of the Russian leadership. Kim Jong-un expressed sincere gratitude for the high assessment of the Russian president towards the state and soldiers of the DPRK and, once again, assured that the alliance with Russia will remain strong and unbreakable. The parties discussed a number of issues of mutual interest, including the expansion of bilateral cooperation in the political, economic, and military spheres. An agreement was reached to continue close contacts and coordinate actions on international platforms. According to the Kremlin press service, during the conversation, Vladimir Putin told Kim Jong-un about the upcoming meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump and outlined Russia's approaches to this dialogue. The leaders of Russia and the DPRK confirmed their intention to expand bilateral cooperation, which in the current conditions means, among other things, coordination on issues of supply and military support. Putin paid special attention to gratitude for Pyongyang's assistance in liberating the Kursk region from the Ukrainian armed forces. This point is extremely important since we are talking about direct recognition of the DPRK's contribution to the Russian operation. Although official sources do not disclose details of the form of this assistance, experts do not rule out that we are talking about both the supply of material and technical resources and consultative support. North Korea's support is important not only in a military but also in a political sense, Pyongyang has long been an opponent of Western policy, and its open solidarity with Moscow sends a clear signal that Russia has allies willing to act despite pressure from the United States and its partners. Against the backdrop of Ukraine's growing international isolation, this step strengthens Russia's position in the Asian region and expands its room for maneuver in the diplomatic and economic spheres. It is noteworthy that Kim Jong-un's statement was made right now when noticeable changes in favor of Russian troops are taking place at the front. This creates the effect of synchronization of military successes and political support, which always strengthens the moral effect both inside the country and abroad. For the Ukrainian side and its Western curators, this is an unpleasant signal, meaning that Russia's resource and diplomatic isolation has not taken place. Western analysts have already noted that strengthening ties between Russia and the DPRK could lead to the emergence of a new logistical and military technical channel that would be the hardest to block. The geographical location of the DPRK and the specifics of its economy allow it to provide assistance bypassing most Western sanctions. If we add to this the ability to produce certain types of weapons and ammunition, then the potential for such cooperation becomes obvious. Thus, Kim Jong-un's statement becomes not just a gesture of politeness, but an element of a strategic picture in which Russia is forming a circle of allies capable of supporting it in the long term. This addition to domestic successes on the front makes Moscow's position more stable and opens up new prospects in the protracted confrontation with Kiev and its Western sponsors. There are events ahead that will show how deep and practical this support will be. And in order not to miss a single important turn, I recommend subscribing to the channel. Here we follow all the changes and give a complete picture of what is happening without distortion. The events of the last few days are coming together to form a single picture that clearly indicates that the special military operation is entering a new phase. The enemy's loss of Kolodezi, breakthroughs in the Red Army direction, panic in individual brigades, attacks on the Klebanbek Reservoir, and the destruction of infantry groups, all these are signs that the defensive formations of the armed forces of Ukraine are beginning to fail in several areas of the front at once. Russian troops are methodically destroying the enemy's supply system, destroying reserves, and knocking him out of key lines. The capture of Kolodezi was not only a tactical success but also a strategic signal that the Ukrainian defense in this sector is losing an important stronghold. This opens the way for advancing deep into enemy territory and creates a threat of encirclement of its units in neighboring areas. The Ukrainian side's reaction to this development demonstrates the lack of a clear plan and the inability to quickly compensate for losses. The hasty redeployment of units not only fails to solve the problem but also weakens other sections of the front. The strikes on the Klebanbek Reservoir, the destruction of the crossing, and temporary deployment of troops are examples of the Russian army's work in the format of reconnaissance and strike complexes. Targets are identified by unmanned reconnaissance and hit with high-precision artillery or missile fire. This approach not only damages the enemy's manpower and equipment, but also undermines its ability to maneuver and concentrate efforts. For the Ukrainian armed forces, this means a constant feeling of vulnerability even at the depth of defense. The international aspect also enhances the effect of military actions. Kim Jong-un's statement on unconditional support for Russia, the DPRK's readiness to strengthen the alliance and help in the military and political spheres add a powerful diplomatic factor to what is happening. Russia demonstrates that even under pressure and sanctions, it is able to find allies ready for practical actions. This is becoming especially noticeable against the background of the gradual cooling of some Western countries to the idea of endless funding for Kyiv. Looking ahead, we can expect the Russian command to continue to operate in its current manner, combining offensive operations in several directions with pinpoint strikes on critical enemy targets. The main goal is to disrupt logistics, isolate certain sections of the front, and force Ukrainian troops to retreat or surrender. This, combined with international support from allies, could accelerate a turnaround in the protracted phase of the conflict. However, one should not underestimate the enemy. Kyiv, despite the losses, will try to stabilize the situation and possibly prepare new lines of defense west of the current positions. At the same time, the information campaign from the Ukrainian side, as before, will try to hide the real scale of the defeats, presenting them as maneuvers or regroupings. But when the Russian side has photo and video evidence at its disposal and the pace of the offensive is maintained, such a strategy of information cover loses its effectiveness. In the coming weeks, events may occur in the Donetsk and Krasnoarmeysk directions that will change the configuration of the front. The enemy's losses of key lines and its forced retreats may lead to a chain reaction, when the fall of one defensive node will cause the collapse of several neighboring ones at once. This will be the moment when the pace of advance may increase sharply. We are now witnessing how military and political factors are combining to form a single result, reinforcing each other. The offensive on the ground, strikes on the enemy's critical infrastructure, and the formation of an international coalition of Russia's supporters are all links in the same chain. That is why it is important to follow the developments, because there may be decisive days ahead for the special military operation that will determine its final trajectory.